Hi, I'm Scott the Miniature Maniac, and today we're comparing scale model paint techniques with miniature paint techniques on this beautiful model, Refuge. What up, Mini family? Today I'm joined again by Todd. Todd, how you doing?
Doing pretty good, Scott.
Todd is actually a local creator here in the Twin Cities. He runs a company called AIRBRUSH, and he focuses mostly on letterpress printed products, but also has been delving into the world of model kits and stuff like that. But just like myself and my interest in combining passions, it seems like you also have that interest and wanted to put together multiple things with this project. We're painting his ship, Refuge, which you can find right now on Kickstarter. It's based on a story that he is going to write, which is going to come to Kickstarter later in the year. But today we're painting this massive ship.
This is the Asahi ISV-3. In this story, an interstellar species comes to visit Earth, and they have built this spaceship into an asteroid.
I love how you say that the spaceship is kind of like a work in progress. Like they're currently still building around the asteroid. They're like 1/3 of the way through, but they're not there entirely yet. It's cool how the story is like obvious in the model itself. And I also love the base. The base kind of really sets the stage for the scale of this thing, and like also like how it's set up. It's like plummeting down to Earth, or what I imagine is Earth.
This looks like impending doom. And that's not the story, but
in today's video, we're going to replicate the paint job that Todd has on this spaceship. He's going to use the methods that he used to get this result, and I'm going to paint another version of it, trying to emulate what he's done here, but using paints and materials that us miniature painters are more familiar with. So let's get started. Okay, so first things first, I'm seeing this is definitely khaki, a little bit of yellow in there. I think the shading looks a little bit dark and black and ashen, maybe a little bit green. But khaki kind of turns green when you kind of shade it down with black a bit. So I'm gonna start with some khaki and some black to kind of get this initial shading.
So I painted this with Tamiya paints, Tamiya flat. When I first got into model making again, I used a lot of Vallejo, but I've been a lot more pleased with the results that I get from Tamiya. And I'm starting with a deck tan.
I'm gonna start with Mojave white. It's like a yellowed white from scale 75. It's kind of matte. You kind of have like a matte look here. A little bit of yellow in there, but mostly white. And then I'm going to also use some black ink for my shading. On a figure that's this large, there's a lot of surface to blend across, so I'm not going to really bother that much with like trying to like do anything with the brushwork so far. I'm going to do it mostly through the airbrush, and I know that through an airbrush, an acrylic high flow ink can go on really smoothly. I got to make sure that I'm just doing it in a really diluted way.
Yeah.
I think one massive difference that a lot of mini painters are going to notice when painting a model kit like this is just like the volume of paint you go through, because the model is just so much larger. I've had to like refill my airbrush here a couple of times because I'm just like not correctly assuming how much paint I'm gonna need to cover everything on this model.
I guess the latest thing I was working on was a 1/44 scale Millennium Falcon, so that's like the size of a dinner plate. Being older with my failing eyes and shaky hands, like I just could never do a little 28mm guy and make him not look like a burn victim. Are you suffering from airbrush cup envy? I mean, like, look at the size of your cup, it's dinky.
Are we comparing right now, bro?
We are, yep, sorry.
Let's take a break from painting the lovely Asahi Interstellar Space Vehicle to tell you about today's sponsor, and that's Todd. As you know, AIRBRUSH, Todd's company, launched a Kickstarter where you can pick up this unique artist-made model kit physically and in STL format for 3D printing. The kit is composed of 10 parts, which includes the awesome Scale City base and the acrylic rod for attaching the ship to the base. Stretch goals for the campaign include a beautiful letterpress print of the Asahi spaceship illustrated by Todd, as well as a custom decal sheet for the model. If we reach these goals, even STL level backers will receive the print and decals. The kit comes with instructions for assembly, and later on in Kickstarter updates, Todd will send out painting tips for the model itself. Personally, I love the kit that Todd has put together because unlike subject matters like monsters and animals, this model has so much room for interpretation while also having obvious design lines to be creative within. Those two design elements put you, the painter, in the driver's seat as far as crafting a narrative for this model while not being overwhelmed by limitless possibilities. Todd and I have also had a working relationship for a while. He's responsible for all the packaging for all of my models, and I can attest to the quality craftsmanship of the products he stamps his name on. So don't worry, you're in the hands of someone who cares deeply about his customers. You can find a link to the campaign in the description below. All right, back to comparing scale model techniques against miniature painting techniques. I'm starting to experience some paint envy as well, periodically, because I'm dealing with a very matte paint range that is also acrylic. I have to come with a toothbrush and clean off my needle because it's blocking further paint from really getting out. Okay. Have you had to clean your tip yet of your airbrush?
No.
Okay, so that's one difference, you know.
Once I started airbrushing with Tamiya's, like I never have problems.
Okay, so with my base coat complete, and because we have maybe a little bit more limited time painting this model today, I'm gonna do a little bit different of an approach. Definitely still standard mini painting, but I'm going to do dry brushing at this stage. But I'm excited about this because I've recently learned of like a best practice when dry brushing that produces much better results that normally I wasn't able to get before. And that's when you're dabbing off your dry brush to get rid of the paint off of it so that you're left with less paint in the bristles. You should do it on a surface that isn't absorbent. So typically, the thought here is that you're going to wipe paint off on like paper towel. But the issue with paper towel is it soaks up the medium in the brush, leaving behind the pigment in the bristles. And so when you dry brush that on, it looks really dry and arid, which is like an effect you can go for if you want. But if you wipe paint off on, like say on this cutting mat, Miniac.co, it wouldn't soak up any medium, and you'd be left with an equal portion of both medium and pigment. Okay. And so when you dry brush it on, then it looks less dusty. But just in case it still looks dusty, I'm gonna do it now so that when I do ink on top of that and other things on top of that, it might kind of subdue that kind of dry effect if it does happen.
I've just, I switched from my deck tan to a little bit of buff just to basically get another color.
So do you often add like a second kind of similar hue color just to like break up a large surface on a model kit?
I do, and then because I'm working on, you know, larger scale objects, I don't want my robots to look like they just came out of the factory. Like, you know, there needs to be some sort of fading, some basically modeling that happens, you know? And that really helps, like just kind of using some slightly different tones. You know, with this, I didn't even clean the airbrush. I just added it in, so it's kind of like, that helps to blend them a little bit too.
I think I also unintentionally got surface variation when I was base coating my model because I didn't perfectly cover everything on the model, so some of the undercoat shows through, so you have like areas like down there that are darker than like up here on this flat area. I think that definitely is important on a big old model kit. Do you find when you're painting model kits that like you are trying to like incorporate a lot of subtle effects, or do you try to be more overt about certain things? I know a lot of mini painters stress contrast on their paint jobs very often. How often are you doing stuff like that, or are you trying to stay more low key?
I'm trying to boost the contrast for sure, but I think one of the things that's different is that, again, my scale is so different. So you're working on like a, let's say a 6-foot figure who's an inch tall, versus like a spaceship to the size of a dinner plate. I don't think you don't need to boost it quite as much. So what I did is just mixed up a little bit of deck tan and some buff, and I'm just brushing it, and then I thinned it. Basically just trying to give some streaks, kind of making it look like it's been streaking as it's traveling through space. Again, providing some of that kind of modulation, hitting some edges. Yeah, it's a little more, like it's really just kind of like pushing and pulling. It's, you know, like I've been kind of bringing in some of these light streaks, and now I'm gonna darken this a little bit, and I'll just kind of keep going back and forth, layering it up. Yeah. And eventually we'll get to where I'll feel like it's complete. It is very opaque, So generally I would thin it down and kind of move things around with a little bit of thinner. You have to be careful with that because then that can reactivate what you've previously painted.
Oh.
So it helps to say like do your base coat and then like, you know, let that cure for a while before starting to brush.
So for me, what I'm doing right now is I'm taking some highly diluted black ink here, and I'm just I'm shading very widely where the skirt portion meets the orb, and also where it kind of like dips down in the middle here. I am doing a little dark shading in there as well. And I'm still kind of in my broad strokes phase. I'm not like doing anything too specific at the moment, but I'm just kind of getting the major volumes in place, trying to match your kind of like ashen tan look that you had on the original model.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm pretty happy with what the black looks like on this cream now. I did get some of that like kind of greening effect that you get when I think you mix yellow and black together.
Yeah.
And I think I'm ready for my next step, which is gonna be some more specific recess shading.
So right now I'm using some NATO black to fill in these sort of sensor areas.
So now I'm taking a contrast paint from GW's range, and I'm going to use it as a recess shade, kind of sticking in the family here of acrylic products. I think, to me, a panel liner would probably be a much better tool for this, but I'm just trying to illustrate the differences and the different tools you can take when you're sticking entirely with acrylic paint. Contrast paint, inadvertently, is also a pretty good paint for recess shading, and the properties it has that are important are it has obviously a bit of surfactant in it, so it breaks surface tension easily, which a lot of washes and similar products have. It has a good flow because it's a thinner product, and so it doesn't fight you when it wants to come off the brush and go into a recess. Those things are similar to washes, but one thing that contrast paint has going for it is that it is more pigmented. And so the recess shade shows up a little bit better than it would with a wash, which is kind of a more diluted, transparent product.
Just added some NATO black to my sort of base color of a mix to kind of give some more kind of the streaks down in the darker shadowed area. In the way that like there was the zenithal highlighting with the dark down at the base, the way this fits into like the half that you're holding, like the lower half kind of basically stays shadowed from these scalloped parts. So basically just trying to emphasize that a little bit.
Nice, okay. I'm gonna take a little globule of skeleton horde here from GW, and I'm gonna kind of place it on the model. I'm gonna let that dry for a little bit, but not like a super long time. I want basically the outer edge of that globule to dry, but not the inner portion. And that was probably long enough. And then with a kind of damp brush, I want to kind of like soak up the inside. And then this gives me this like kind of very natural kind of coffee stain look. And now I can mess with this further. I can add like drips going away from it, or that can just be like a burn mark from this thing like entering the atmosphere or something like that.
Yeah.
And I can add this in a few other spots around the model, changing the brown color at the same time to kind of give it more of a tarnished, okay, this thing has seen some wear look.
Nice.
Some more variety.
Now I'm just coming back with my base color and hitting it with like hitting some highlights.
So now I have some Rakarth flesh, which is I don't know, another kind of khaki color, but it's slightly darker. And I am coming in and hitting some of these edges with just like a darker khaki color. I'm not trying to make too stark of an effect here, but just like you were doing over there with like the different color streaks and the different color tans, I just want to introduce some more surface irregularity with textures and also different tan colors. Todd just got back from applying a bit of varnish to the thing he's working on. Why'd you want to intermittently varnish the pedal?
Because I want to do some washes on here, and I figured that would just sort of allow them to move around a little bit better. Again, I think because the matte finish on this is just so grippy that it'll allow me to kind of move things around a bit. Again, trying to bring out some of the edges, some of the recessed areas.
I'm gonna start doing some edge highlighting. I kind of like to do a lot of like maybe messier stuff beforehand, and also stuff that I know is gonna mess with the edges beforehand. For instance, like that recessed shading, I knew applying it with a contrast paint, I would get some recessed paint on the actual edge itself where I wanted the highlight to be. So I do that stage first, so I can do the highlighting later, kind of cover up some of those crimes. Some people might be curious why I am both dry brushing and doing an edge highlight. I did a dry brush earlier in the process just to like add some nice variation to the surface and do a little bit of this work ahead of time, and then kind of knocked back some of that with future weathering effects and stuff like that. So I'm kind of just coming back in and re-strengthening that and just adding another layer of diversity and different colors and stuff like that. I think model kits really lend themselves to that kind of painting approach.
Since I didn't bring oils and Scott doesn't have a light oil, basically I'm bringing back my acrylic paint to bring some highlights in.
Okay, but normally you would take a white oil paint, you would put it down and then kind of feather it out?
Yeah, so like I would use varying cream, kind of tans, grays. So what I like about them is like that their translucency. So like I'd basically put a little on like the highlight and then just, yeah, totally feather it, and it'd be nice and soft. So these are a little bit bolder, but they'll still look all right.
I forgot earlier in the process that I wanted to do some streaking, so now what I'm doing is I'm just taking more of that same contrast paint. I dab off a lot on a wet paper towel, and then I can just draw streaks really thinly right from where I kind of like put these stains. And I feel like normally you might do this in a model kit world with like oil paint and I put a glob down, but yeah, this is maybe a similar result, but with an acrylic product.
And now if you feel like if you did one and you weren't happy with it, can you sort of wet your brush and wipe it off?
Nope.
Or no? Okay. I like these little. I did. Jesus.
He was about to say that he liked a little Citadel
I
paint pot until he realized that they're actually trash. I love how we can see that in real time.
Seriously, it's like all over now.
Yeah.
God.
I'm gonna paint some little squares here as LEDs like Todd had on the original. They're so small that I don't need to do a ton of blending on them, but what I'll do is I'll start with a desaturated version of the color I want it to be eventually. So I took some red and that's kind of mixed with brown, a little bit darker, and then I'm gonna come back in with a much brighter red just to kind of give it the impression that it's glowing. I wanna do this sparingly. I mean, I could go crazy with the amount of these little squares that I turn into glowing things, but yeah, that's my plan.
So I just lightened up my base coat and just giving some more edge highlights.
So being inspired by Todd's paint job of this, I'm going to paint a couple of these recessed panels here as glowing screens. So now I'm gonna do some of these little sci-fi lettering inside these little screens I made for myself.
Oh, those are cool.
Yeah, and I'm using a mixture of white acrylic paint and also white ink. I think that gives me a nice blend of paint that is both opaque in its coverage, but also has like really good flow. It comes off the end of my brush nicely. For my last trick, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna airbrush, and this is a little scary, a tiny amount of this blue ink on top of the screen to color the white text to be more blue, but also to get a little bit of glow around the screen like it's glowing on the ship. I'm turning my pressure down because I want to get close to the spaceship, and I don't want the paint to spiderweb immediately upon landing on the model. If you're curious about the pink airbrush that I'm using in this video, it's a Harder & Steenbeck Infinity that features the art of a Ukrainian artist. 50% of all the sales go toward Ukrainian relief. I'm super proud of Harder & Steenbeck for representing the hobby in this way, and I'd love to see more companies do the same. You can find the airbrush linked down in the description below if you're interested. All right, come to the end of our day here. Todd is about to pack up and leave, and I hope what you guys can see from this process is that while me and Todd are using different tools and materials, we are kind of arriving at a similar endpoint. And so you can accomplish a wide variety of tasks with more of a model kit approach, more of a miniature painting approach, but some tools are just more suited for the job than others. And really the best solution for all hobbyists would be to just kind of merge our like knowledge together and use the right tool for the right job. So instead of me using a contrast paint for recess shading, I might use a panel liner from Tamiya or something like that. We can all learn a lot from one another. But thank you, Todd, for being here, for showing your awesome miniature. If you guys want to check out the Kickstarter that he is running right now, you can find it linked down in the description below. You'll find this awesome model, the stand that it comes on, and what else can you find over there?
You'll be able to either get the model or you'll be able to get an STL that's fully supported. So you could print this at home as well.
Awesome.
I'm also going to have a few, very few pieces that are fully assembled and painted for someone who wanted something that's just for display. Thanks for having me on here. It's very cool, like to be on your show again and to paint with this together. Like it's been fun. So thank you.
Absolutely. If you guys like the channel and you want to support it, there are many ways that you can do that down in the description below. Subscribe or die, and most importantly, don't forget to
Paint more minis.